Welcome to the Ignition News, your unfiltered, uncensored source for the actual truth in what is happening in the United States of America and around the world. We are not bought by the billionaires. We are here to be your source of truth in a time where truth matters more than it ever has. Be sure to follow along with your favorite platform on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Substack. Let's get busy with the truth. Welcome to the Ignition News. Let's ignite. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ignition News. It is February 2nd, 2026. There are so many things to talk about right now. It's kind of hard to believe all of the news that it's happening, but we have a lot to get into. Let me go ahead and just say thank you for everyone for tuning in. I do want to remind you, we do this as a live daily news show, so it's important. I set out a big challenge yesterday. I said, please go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcast platforms. Before I get into the news story today, I'm going to take a little bit of a pause, and I'm going to ask you to go find us on Spotify, Substack, Apple, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, The Ignition News. If you're not sure where to find us, go to theignition.news and go ahead and click follow. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to go ahead and follow the show because it's important, because these ties, moderator Cat helped me tie my tie this morning. You know, it's all about you. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Go ahead and do that. Good. I appreciate you. All right. Well, it is February 2nd. I want to give you some trivia about today. I've been trying to lighten up the mood lately because we live in dark times. So here's some trivia about today. Let's see. Today, February 2nd, is some interesting facts. Today's the invention of the polygraph in 1935. The first lie detector was used in a court of law on this day in Portage, Wisconsin. Leonard Keeler tested 2 suspects using his invention, which measured heart rate and breathing. Low Earth orbit was first accomplished today. 8 planets in our solar system aligned for the first time in 400 years this day. And let's see, what else? Elvis Presley received his draft notice for the U.S. Army on this day in 1958, which means that he did more time in the military than, Cankles? What did he have? Bone spurs? And then let's see, what else? It's National Heavenly Hash Day, which is apparently a classic mix of chocolate, marshmallows, and nuts. Has anyone had heavenly hash? I've never actually heard of that. And given the massive bomb cyclone moving through the eastern U.S., you might mention, by the way, that today, is today Groundhog's Day? No, it can't be. It is Groundhog's Day. What happened today? Did anyone know what happened today? What happened? Let's take a look. 6 hour. He did see his shadow, of course. Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow today, which means 6 more weeks of winter. A dark winter is upon us. So why don't you go get some heavenly hash, get yourself some chocolate, marshmallows, and nuts, and quietly sob. Okay? Anyways, let's get on to the news. If you're new to the show, we cover 5 to 6 stories that I think you need to know to help protect and push back against fascism and this growing tide of fascism in the United States of America. Yeah. End test broadcast. It's a loose show today. We have all kinds of technical troubles, but that's okay. Yeah, I don't think we're broadcasting live on Facebook. We're having a little bit of trouble on Facebook as well today. But we are on YouTube. We are on Twitch. We are streaming live on our Spotify broadcast. We got some people over on YouTube. And then we're also on Substack as well as TikTok. So let's get into the stories. Damn technical glitches. Everyone, this is why you need to go follow the show on Spotify or your favorite podcasting platform, okay? Because we need to upgrade. I was just looking at studio upgrades today. We need to do some upgrades. We've got 5 major stories today. I want to tell you about how it all ties together. The first one is obviously Minnesota. And this is an important one. With everything that's happening, with the gloominess of what happened in Minnesota, Minnesota is sort of a bellwether, but something pretty major happened. 2 special elections happened this week in the Twin Cities, and Democrats smashed it. Shelley Buck ran unopposed. No big deal. Meg Loomer Nikolai absolutely crushed her Republican in St. Paul's District 64A. So in St. Paul, a Democrat won 95% of the vote. Obviously, these are both blue districts, so that's not a huge surprise. But what makes this significant is the timing. These are obviously happening days after what happened to both Alex Preddy and Renee Good. But even with that 95%, the swing in Lugar Nikolai's district is 23.5 points. The Minnesota House is now tied 67-67 between Republicans and Democrats, and they're operating under a power-sharing agreement. This is with more than 2,000 federal agents deployed to Minnesota. And this matters, of course, because Minnesota has competitive races both for Senate and the governorship coming up in November. What I think this means, if we keep the pressure up, is I said this. If you go back and scroll and listen to some of the previous episodes. About a month ago, I said Tim Walz is done. I said that. I said Tim Walz, unfortunately, his political career is over. Everyone said I was crazy at the time. Lo and behold, not only did Tim Walz drop out of the governor's race, but he recently announced that he's just done with politics entirely. And the momentum shift in Minnesota was definitely trending away from Walz and away from the Democratic Party. But a 23-point swing towards that Democrat is a good bellwether, but that does not mean we take our foot off of the gas. And of course, we also just talked about yesterday the massive upset in Texas, where a Democrat swung a Trump plus 17 district, winning a major upset victory in a special election. This is not good news. I don't want you to take this and say, this is good news. This is an indication that people still have power while we are being crushed. Does anyone remember that scene in Star Wars where they're in the garbage compactor, right? And like it's clamoring in on them, right? And we are not out of the garbage compactor yet, right? We're putting up the little bar between the garbage compactor to give us a little bit of time to get the secret codes to help us get out of the garbage compactor. Okay, that's where we are right now. The walls are closing in. And yesterday, that special election and the special election in Texas, that's not, it had to be R2, right? It was R2. Someone help me out. It was R2D2 with the codes. It always has to be R2D2. C3PO doesn't know how to open garbage compactors. Anyways, so we are not out of that. It is not going in the opposite direction. Those are just the little bars pushing against the walls closing in on us. Whew, good metaphor. Good metaphor. Now I'm curious. It had to be R2. It had to be. Anyways, next story. Welcome to the Ignition News. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, has said the quiet part out loud. Here's what she said in an interview with Kim Iverson. She said, MAGA is, I think people are realizing it was all a lie. It was a big lie for the people. So obviously that is one of the president's former largest, most vocal allies, someone who went traveling with him and campaigning with him, obviously a massive figure in the Republican Party. And she said, she's going on a little bit further, what MAGA is really serving is the administration. Who they're serving is big donors. The big donors that donated all the money and continue to donate to the president's PAC and donate to the 250th anniversary and are donating to the big ballroom. These are people that get special favors, they get government contracts, they get the pardons. She didn't really stop there. She accused Trump of causing the civil unrest in Minnesota. Obviously, she said also that she is, quote, waging war on behalf of Israel, while hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are being killed so that he could build real estate in Gaza. Now, obviously, they've been going back and forth, and I do not agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on pretty much anything. She's been a conspiracy theorist. She spread a lot of hate and fear-mongering, but she is rebranding herself, and she's putting herself out in the spotlight. Why I talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene is, number one, Marjorie Taylor Greene is rebranding herself and getting ahead of populism in the United States of America. The reason I bring this up is because Marjorie Taylor Greene understands the writing on the wall. She can see what people are saying. She can see this growing wave of populism in the United States of America, and she understands that that is where the American electorate is. What is tragic, what is insane, is that no one in the Democratic Party understands or seems to understand that in spite of the president winning the election, there still exists this wave of populism, and it's something we have to seize. Speaking, by the way, of the Democrats. Our next story. Welcome to the Ignition News, everyone. I want to say thank you. Thanks for following along. We do a daily news show with the top 4 or 5 stories that you need to know to push on. I do want to talk about a really big disappointment in the Democratic Party, and that is Chuck Schumer. Chuck was at a gathering of Jewish leaders in New York on Sunday, and he said something that I think is quite revealing. He said, I have many jobs as leader, and one is to fight for aid to Israel. all the aid that Israel needs. I will continue to fight for it. We delivered more security assistance to Israel, quote, our ally, than ever before. Here's the problem with that statement. 75% of Democrats oppose sending military aid to Israel. 66% of independents oppose sending more military aid to Israel. 60% of all Americans oppose it. Those are very clear numbers. So when Schumer says that he's fighting for a virtually unlimited aid to Israel, and that's one of his main jobs as Democratic leader, he's not representing the Democrats. He's not representing the independents, and he's obviously not representing the Republicans. I have a quote here from a progressive organizer. He said, here's what his job should be. Fight Trump and fascism, help Democrats win back power, pass policy to help working people. Then he lists what shouldn't be on that list. Fight for all the aid that Israel needs. What was his conclusion? If he can't do that, Schumer needs to resign. And I agree. And here's why this matters just beyond like what's happening in Gaza, what's happening with Israel, what's happening with Palestine. Democrats lost in 2024 because a lot of young voters felt betrayed by what Biden and Kamala Harris were doing in Gaza. They weren't listening despite very clear polling to that fact. And this was a major factor in the election. So what does Schumer say? Schumer says, I'm going to double down. And that's the dynamic that we keep seeing. And what I'm telling you, when we look at these special elections, and especially when you look at the special election in Texas, you have, a young, energetic aircraft mechanic who's in tune with the needs of his Texas neighborhood, who's not worried about sending money to Israel, who's worried about sending money to the people in his districts. And if you want to know why people are cynical about both parties, this is exactly why people are cynical about both parties. This is exactly the kind of thing that people are talking about. When 75% of the Democratic base does not want to continue writing endless checks to Israel to fund a genocide in our name, in the name of the United States of America, and you say that one of your main jobs is to provide unlimited military aid to a country, incidentally, which is very equipped to fund its own military defense, which currently funds universal health care for its entire population, which currently funds college education for its entire population, and which uses our very military aid to secure further housing for the country when millions of Americans are risk losing their housing right now. This is not a question of being anti-Semitic. This is a question of thinking about the American citizens, the people of both parties, all shapes and sizes, who can't afford life, who can't afford to, let alone a decent home, but who worry about basic things like medication, healthcare, education. I have constant anxiety about the cost of college for our son. He's 14 now. 1 year of his college education is going to cost more than my entire college education for 4 years, with room, with board, with food, with clothes, with equipment, without working. For 1 year at even the most conservatively, fiscally expensive colleges in the country. And we're worried about sending money to a country which provides universal education, which provides universal health care, which has and makes enough money to fund its own defense, and which, in spite of this government's accusations, does not seem to be acting in our best interest. These comments are not anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish people. They are simply the reality of where the American populace is. We are tired. We are exhausted. And instead of listening to our needs, please come to the street with us. Please come to the street with us. Please stand on the line with us. Please defend our country. Our democratic leaders cannot even defend our democracy. And when asked what his most important job was, funding unlimited aid to Israel, as Sandy says, it is infuriating. And so while obviously we are disappointed with our congressional representation, obviously there are some good news in Congress. A judge has just allowed a major advancement in oversight for these ICE facilities. Kristi Noem issued a memo on January 8th requiring members of Congress to give 7 days advance notice before visiting ICE facilities. A federal judge ruled on this last month, saying the law requires unrestricted access without advance notice. So how's Noem getting around that? She claims she is funding these facilities through the Big Beautiful Bill, which is a different pot of money, so the normal oversight rules don't apply. So what this means, obviously, is ICE is operating detention centers, American concentration camps, where they're holding American citizens, legal residents, and people with pending asylum cases. And they're doing this with your tax dollars. And they're telling people, your elected representatives, that they can't show up and do oversight, which is constitutionally Congress's job. And I would just ask you one simple question. Why does Congress need to provide 7 days notice? Imagine all you can accomplish in cleaning up crimes against humanity in 7 days. As Andy Craig said, it is our job as members of Congress to make sure these folks detained are treated with humanity because we are the United States of America. And we don't treat people the way the administration is treating these people. Well, unfortunately, we do. But the courts are beginning to push back. And they are beginning to say, no, Congress has a job with accountability. They need to be able to do oversight. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ignition News. If you're just joining the feed, we do a daily news show where we give you the top stories I think that you need to hear. Let's get into the next one, the Epstein files. Massive release of Epstein files. On Friday, the department released 3 million pages of documents, and Donald Trump's name appears more than 1,800 times in search results. Some reports have put it as a total of over 38,000 times when you count every reference. Most of these are mentions about articles or articles that Trump saved or Epstein was sharing. Some are correspondence where Epstein himself talks about Trump with other people, but there are some very concerning items that need attention. The documents include a list of unverified FBI tips about Trump compiled last year. These are allegations the FBI received through its National Threat Operations Center. The FBI document notes that many of these tips were never investigated because tipsters didn't leave contact information or the allegations were secondhand. There are also FBI notes about a woman who previously accused Trump in a lawsuit of raping her when she was 13. I want to be honest with you. I have a very difficult time discussing this because I find the conduct in these documents to be abhorrent. I have a difficult time discussing this. I am uncomfortable with it. That doesn't mean that it is not important to discuss this. But as we look at more and more about what is in these documents, certainly there are going to be unverified allegations. Certainly there's going to be sort of things that are not necessarily true. But there is enough credible information about the conduct of the sitting president of the United States against members of his cabinet and administration, against a massive range of individuals. And what is outrageous to me is that the Biden administration, knowing full well the threat of fascism, authoritarianism, the danger to the American people that was barreling towards us once he ran for office, but then certainly once he won the election, that the Biden administration and Merrick Garland specifically sat on this information. They had this information available to them. And some of this information is so horrific, so graphic, and so disgusting that I can't even bring myself to discuss it openly. And I know that doesn't do victim to some of what has been accused, but I simply find it so revolting that even reading the words is viscerally disgusting. And these are some of the people who have the most power, not only in the world, but with control over our everyday lives. And the reason that we need to confront this is quite simple. Anyone who still supports these people, anyone who still supports this administration, this president, his cabinet, anyone credibly accused of these horrific acts against children, I think you should be wary of having them in your life. Anyone who can support credibly accused pedophiles without demanding accountability, these are not people that should be around your children. These are not people that should be around you and in your life. But I've said this many times, and I will say this again. Once the American people are forced to confront these horrible accusations, but then see with their own eyes how these people live, how the 1% lives, and how disconnected from reality it is, it will force a revolution in this country and really in the globe. It will. And so even though it's uncomfortable, even though some of these things are quite difficult, if not impossible to read, we have to confront the truth. And some of it may not be true. We have to be intellectually honest with ourselves. Some of this information is just allegations. Some of it is sensationalism. Some of it is rumor. Some of it is lie. That is just the reality of when you have 3 million pages of information, you're going to have even a very small percent of it that's going to be used as a distraction to say, oh, look, this is so verifiably false that none of it can be false. But that's actually not true. Anyone who understands data knows that you look for the common threads and connections, and you will have outliers in any data set. A good analysis of data is going to understand that there's going to be outliers, high, low, high, low. And you take those outliers and you remove them, you clear through the noise, and you see what is the signal telling us? Let me be very clear with you. I'm not telling you something you don't already know, but sometimes it's good to hear from someone you trust. The vast data, the data is very clear. The most powerful, connected individuals in our country and across this planet were clearly involved in some type of sex trafficking ring under the guise of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. And that fact alone is difficult to confront as a country. It is a difficult thing to confront this because it rocks our core safety. The idea that these people are supposed to protect us, they're supposed to be looking out for us, and they're off on an island doing these horrible things to victims. What kind of people must they be? And something I said in a different forum that I'll say just now to close this out. The most difficult part of this is not necessarily going through this information. It's the fact that the worst of this has yet to come. And the problem we have is we can't imagine it because these people have done these horrible things for so long, horrible things, and they've never been held accountable. And what's crazy about that is they knew the government had this information and they were never held accountable. And what someone is capable of when they know that, when they know they can do some of the worst people, can do some of the worst things and never be held accountable, their brain changes fundamentally. And so we cannot even imagine the depravity that's happened, which is why we have to keep pushing for transparency, which is why we have to keep demanding, and is why eventually we have to hold these people accountable. Whatever we've seen now is not even the tip of the iceberg. And I know you've seen some of the worst of it, and some of the worst of it is truly disgusting. But unfortunately, I think it's not even the beginning of the worst of it. So what do all of these stories tell us? Well, number one, Minnesota is rejecting Trump's immigration crackdown at the ballot box and on the street. Marjorie Taylor Greene and other Republicans are finally starting to understand the stench of this administration. They smell it in the room. And the smart ones are starting to flee. Chuck Schumer, ignoring 75% of his own Democrats. What this tells us is politicians in America do not serve us. We already know this. But what we're starting to see that we've never seen before in this way is we're starting to really understand the raw people power that we have, the raw force of our democracy, the resistance of our democracy, the people power of that is starting to break through all the signal and the noise. There would be no Epstein files if it weren't for the constant demand, pressuring our representatives, cracking through their moral ineptitude. They're shutting down the Kennedy Center for 2 years. The president has to lie and say, oh, we're shutting down the Kennedy Center because we're redoing the Kennedy Center. They're shutting down the Kennedy Center because no one wants to perform at a building that has the name of a pedophile because performers are fleeing. They can't even get third grade choirs to perform at the Kennedy Center. And those artists are doing that at great personal cost, great financial cost, great reputational cost. But we are forcing these fascists into the corner. And the thing I keep telling everyone, something to close this out with, is I know that, please check out, I'll be releasing a video later today about why January was obviously horrible, but why we should have great hope. And the reason that we should have great hope is, number one, this administration has the following formula. They think a little bit of toughness with a lot of tough talk is going to push us into this authoritarianism, this Christian nationalist fascism. But when that doesn't work, when a little bit of violence and a lot of violent talk gets just a little bit of pushback, they constantly flail. They constantly fail. Every time there's any meaningful pushback, they back down. So when they push us, today's theme is simple. Push back. Push back. This is our country. It is our democracy. And the last thing I'll tell you today, I keep saying the last thing, but I promise you this. One of the things I'm going to really challenge you to this year specifically, especially during the dark times, we tend to think of fighting against this fascism and against this president, against our Senate minority leader who only cares about funding aid to Israel so that we can sign bombs that kill children. But that is not enough. It is not enough for you simply to think of fighting against fascism. Because if that's all you ever think about, they will just ratchet up their fight. What we have to start thinking of, dreaming of, envisioning, and imagining is what we are fighting for. Don't be so cornered that you yourself forget what is possible. what it is you want for yourself, your children, your health, your destiny. They are trying to rob you of your destiny. Because fighting fascism is hard. It's tiring. It takes time, energy, effort, money. It takes your soul. But you have to dig deep. You have to think about what a liberated version of yourself, this country, your neighbors, your friends, and your family look like. And I bet you right now you can't think of that, or it might be very, very tough because you have to think past this layer and this layer and this layer and this bill and this thing and this protest and this president and this file, all these things. But I'm going to keep pushing you. I'm going to keep pushing you to dream of a better time, to dream of something better, and to find people capable of delivering that to you. This is not a 2-day fight. This is not a 2-year fight. This is a decades-long, multi-generational quest for liberation. That's why we do this. The truth matters. And so when you feel gloomy, doomy, desperate, scared, afraid, concerned, unsure where to go, what I want you to do is, yeah, that's right, dog. What I want you to do, that's right, buddy. What I want you to do is I want you to take that energy, that fear, that concern, and I want you to take it and push it at me. And then what I will do, very simply, I will push back. That's our show, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Ignition News. This has been today's episode of The Ignition News. Please consider following us on all of your favorite podcast platforms, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or Substack. We're here to deliver to you unfiltered, uncensored news. Let's get busy with the truth on The Ignition News.